When a conflict erupts, voices raise, and the environment becomes emotionally volatile, your immediate reaction is to go completely silent. When you do this, society is incredibly quick to judge you. They call you passive-aggressive. They accuse you of being emotionally unavailable. They assume you are giving them the silent treatment to manipulate the dynamic or to punish the person standing across from you. That is a massive biological illusion. The act of going silent when you are deeply upset is rarely a calculated weapon of control. For highly perceptive and sensitive individuals, it is a highly evolved, protective neurological response. What you are experiencing in that quiet moment is not a lack of thoughts or a sudden emptiness. You do not go silent because you have nothing to say. You go silent because you feel entirely too much to express safely. In the next few minutes, we are going to explore the brutal clinical reality behind why people go silent when they are upset. We will dissect the exact neurological difference between malicious stonewalling and involuntary emotional regulation. We will expose why your brain treats this silence as a necessary, heavy shield against catastrophic impulsive reactions. And most importantly, we will reveal why this brilliant short-term survival strategy can slowly mutate into a prison of permanent loneliness if left unchecked. Pause and write this down now. Your silence is not a sign of weakness, it is a heavy shield of emotional intelligence. Let us look at the anatomy of the silent reaction. The greatest misconception about withdrawing when upset is the assumption that your mind has simply shut off. The person arguing with you looks at your blank face and assumes you simply do not care. They could not be more wrong. Internally, you are highly active. Your mind is racing through 1,000 different scenarios, analyzing every word that was just said and feeling the emotional impact with agonizing intensity. You are profoundly overwhelmed by a flood of neurochemicals. A 2024 study on emotional regulation and conflict response revealed that highly sensitive individuals experience a cortisol spike during arguments that is nearly double that of the average population. Your nervous system does not simply register mild annoyance, it registers a psychological hemorrhage. Your brain is rapidly processing the aggressive tone of their voice, the micro-expressions on their face, and the historical data of every time this exact situation has played out before. Because your past experiences have taught you that speaking in a state of extreme vulnerability only leads to more pain, dismissal, or severe misunderstanding, your brain flips a master switch. It initiates a total communication blackout. You retreat inward to process the massive influx of sensory data. You are not empty. You are a locked vault filled with absolute chaos. They see a quiet room. They do not realize the house is silently burning from the inside. To understand this deliberate withdrawal, we must look at the neurobiology of impulse control and regulation. When average people get upset, they react instantly. They yell, they throw insults, and they let their primitive amygdala hijack their vocal cords. You operate on a completely different frequency. You possess a hyper-vigilant prefrontal cortex. When you feel the intense, burning surge of anger or pain, your brain instantly calculates the trajectory of the conflict. It realizes that if you open your mouth and react impulsively, you will say something completely destructive. You know exactly what words to use to tear the other person down, but you also know that those words will cause permanent, irreversible damage to the relationship. So, you hit the emergency brake. This requires an astronomical amount of cognitive energy. You are actively suppressing your sympathetic nervous system. Your silence is a heavily calculated pause. It acts as both a protective shield for your own nervous system and a barrier to prevent further relational casualties. You choose to swallow the burning anger because you care deeply about the outcome. You are sacrificing your immediate need to vent in order to protect the other person from your raw, unfiltered emotional state. Society tells you that communication is always the answer, but behavioral psychology knows that communicating while flooded with adrenaline is entirely destructive. Rewind this if needed. You did not choose silence to hurt them, you chose silence to save them from your storm. This brilliant regulatory mechanism, however, comes with a brutal and exhausting cost. The people around you almost never understand the massive sacrifice you are making in real time. When you go silent to protect the dynamic, they frequently misinterpret your withdrawal as cold indifference. They view your emotional restraint as a personal insult. This leads to the most dangerous phase of the conflict, the interrogation trap. Because your silence makes them deeply uncomfortable, they begin to push. They demand that you speak. They accuse you of not caring. They corner you and aggressively insist that you react immediately. This completely backfires. When an overwhelmed nervous system is pushed to express itself before it feels safe, the silence only deepens. Your brain registers their aggressive demands not as an invitation to deeply connect, but as a secondary attack. You realize that they do not actually want to understand your complex feelings. They just want to relieve their own anxiety by forcing you to speak on their timeline. So, you retreat even further into your fortress. You lock the heavy doors, pull down the blinds, and sit in the heavy, agonizing silence, waiting for the threat to pass. You cannot force a locked door open without completely breaking the frame. The tragedy of this dynamic is what happens over a long period of time. While going silent is an incredibly healthy and intelligent short-term coping strategy, staying silent forever becomes a biological prison. When you constantly use withdrawal as your primary shield, the silence stops being a conscious choice and begins to calcify into an involuntary habit. You start to use the shield not just during massive conflicts, but during minor disagreements. You begin to swallow small frustrations, minor boundary violations, and subtle disrespects. You internalize everything because it feels infinitely safer than risking a misunderstanding. But the human body is not designed to be a permanent storage facility for unexpressed pain. The weight of all those unspoken words begins to manifest somatically. This is why you constantly wake up with a clenched jaw. This is why your shoulders are tight and you suffer from unexplainable exhaustion. Your body is physically bracing against the weight of the emotions you refuse to externalize. Over time, you start to feel a profound emotional distance from the people you love. You sit in the same room with them, share meals with them, and smile politely, but you feel like you are on a completely different planet. This protective mechanism slowly morphs into high-functioning loneliness. You successfully protected yourself from the conflict, but you accidentally locked yourself out of the connection. A shield that you never put down eventually becomes a heavy, golden cage. If you are the person who goes silent when upset, you must confront a very difficult clinical reality. Your silence is entirely valid. It is a sign of deep emotional intelligence, a highly active prefrontal cortex, and a profound capacity for care. But healing and authentic human connection require eventual expression. You cannot survive entirely inside your own head. You must learn the delicate, terrifying balance of using the pause to regulate your nervous system without letting that pause become a permanent barrier to your life. The key to true healing is not simply forcing yourself to talk more in unsafe, volatile environments that will only re-traumatize your nervous system and reinforce the need to hide. The key is identifying and cultivating safe environments where your vulnerability will not be weaponized against you. You must find the rare people who can sit with you in the quiet, who do not demand immediate answers, and who understand that your silence is just a temporary waiting room for your truth. When you finally feel safe enough to lower the shield, the words will naturally return without the destructive fire. If this clinical breakdown resonated with the silent reality of your life, subscribe to the channel. Your silence is not a weakness. It is a highly evolved armor. Honor the protection. Build the bridge. See you in the next protocol.